And although USPs, unique selling points, originate from marketing, it's actually a core element of your overall school strategy to identify and to know how you're going to communicate your unique selling point. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello. Now, this week we are diving into a really important marketing concept, but it is not just for marketers. Heads and governors and leaders in schools need to get their head around your school's unique selling point. It's USP. And this podcast episode is based on one of my most frequent conversations that I have with people, especially with leaders and governors in strategy away days or strategy development sessions. And they tell me that they're finding it really hard to identify their unique selling point, their USP. They're kind of questioning, do we actually need one? They're saying, but it's really hard to identify what's different about us compared to everybody else. And it actually leads to a fair amount of confusion and heartache, a lot of hard thinking that goes into this process. And although USPs, unique selling points, originate from marketing, it's actually a core element of your overall school strategy to identify and to know how you're going to communicate your unique selling point. So this time in this episode, what we're going to be talking about is firstly, what is a USP? What are the key components of a good USP? Why is this so hard for schools? Why is this something that people really struggle with? But equally, why is it worth pursuing? Why is it worth defining and communicating your USP? And then finally, we're going to wrap up by thinking about how you can find your USP, your unique selling point for your school. Really quickly, before we dive into the detail, I want to make sure that you make the most of the time you invest listening to this podcast. And the best way to do that is to make sure you grab a copy of my free ebook, The Strategic Independent School Leader. It outlines how to answer the 6 essential questions that will clarify your school strategy and secure its future. In the world of business, strategy can be full of jargon, but it doesn't have to be that way. This is a jargon-free tool tailor-made to help private school leaders think and act more strategically. Download your free copy today at www.consultjuliette.co.uk/ebook. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is what is a USP? So it's short for unique selling point, or sometimes unique selling proposition, which basically means the same thing. And it is defined by the Cambridge University Dictionary as a feature of a product that makes it different from and better than other similar products, and that can be emphasised in advertisements for the product. So just to break that down, it has to be something that's different from other schools. Now, the word unique is the first misleading part of this whole concept. It doesn't actually need to be absolutely unique. It needs to be something that's different from your main competition. It doesn't mean to be something that you are the only school in the world to do. Let's set the bar a little bit lower than that. But it does need to be something which is different from your key competitors. It needs to be better than some of those key competitors. Now, this is really important. We dive into this in a bit more detail. This is a subjective idea that it is better than what other schools can provide. So every family will have a different understanding of what is better than other schools. They will have different things that they care about and different levels of importance that they attach to each of these different features that you might be pulling out and focusing on in your marketing. So when you're thinking about it being better than other similar products, other similar schools in your market, you need to understand and think about your ideal family, your main core audience when it comes to pupil recruitment. What do they care about? Your USP needs to be something which is relevant to those families that you are targeting, that you are really focusing on communicating with, you want to attract to your school. It has to be something that they are going to be making a decision on, so it has to be relevant in their decision-making process for it to be an effective USP. And then the final part of that definition, it needs to be something that you can emphasize in your marketing. So it needs to be something quite simple. It needs to be something that you can have real clarity around, that you can communicate with words, with pictures, with video in a really compelling way. So it needs to be something that you can package, if you like, in a marketing sense, in order to then communicate it in a clear and compelling way to your ideal family, your key audience. So that's your USP. Now, it's generally known within marketing, this is pretty much undisputed, that it is a good thing to have. It is a good thing to be able to say to your target audience why you are better than the alternatives. So therefore, it is a good thing for your school to have. But it is super hard to define. And the main reason for this is because all good schools are very similar. You may not want to admit that, at least not in public in your marketing. But let's be honest with ourselves. An excellent school is very similar in most ways to all other excellent schools. There will be small things that make you different, that make you stand out, that make you particularly attractive to your target audience. And those are the things you're looking for. But the vast majority of what you do actually should follow best practice for excellent schools. So in a way, it should be that you're mostly similar to all of your other schools that are excellent in the competition. And if you try to go too far and you try to push yourself too far out into that realm of being unique, you're so different from the competition, parents are going to largely ask questions about that. They're going to be potentially a little fearful about the idea that you are so different from all of the other excellent schools out there. Actually, why are you making yourself so different? What is it that makes that better? They're going to question that if it's too unique compared to the marketplace. So it is important that you know your USP, but it needs to be something where you are communicating that we are an excellent school and therefore we follow the best practice just like all other excellent schools. We do all of the simple things really well. Absolutely, without a doubt. We deliver day in, day out, without exception, an excellent education. And you want to define those things on the margins where your target audience cares about them, where you're a bit better, where you're a bit different, a bit better, and you're doing something which actually is the icing on the cake that they can't possibly live without. They really compelling reason why they have to choose your school, because of that icing on the cake, that little reason, the way you do things slightly differently. That is super exciting. You are so committed to it. You believe it in as a school through the bones of everybody that's in that school. You believe that this is the right way to do excellent education. So that's why it's hard. You can't find something that's a knockout. We do this one thing better than everyone else. Because actually everyone is trying to improve and using best practice and using examples from other schools constantly to improve what they're doing. So you're looking for that little bit of the icing on the cake, which is a bit different, that you can communicate to your target audience about why what you do is that little bit better, that little bit more excellent than everybody else. So how do you find this USP? There are a couple of things you need to be doing. And let's be honest, none of this is rocket science. You've probably thought about these things before, but it's a checklist. You've got to consider each of these things. So first of all, you need to ask your community, your pupils, your parents, your staff. You want to be asking them in a variety of ways. So doing surveys, asking them in person, doing kind of town hall meetings as much as possible, just chatting to them on the touchline, in the playgrounds. And you need to have a really good understanding about what is it that those audiences, those people in your community that know you best, what do they like most about your school? What do they cherish that they couldn't possibly imagine ever that you would stop doing? Why is it they chose your school in the first place? And you can do surveys where you're asking people for the 3 words that come to mind when they think of your school. And that will often also uncover some of these unique elements about what is it about your school that your community really values, they really cherish. The second thing you want to be doing is, as a leadership team, and potentially as an all-staff group as well, you need to be considering the subjects, the co-curricular activities and the facilities that you really excel at. The things where you are head and shoulders above the competition. And that might be a particular sport. It might be that you've got the most amazing swimming facilities. And so that kind of area of your co-curriculum, your facilities, is something you want to pull out as a USP. It might be a particular academic focus where you are head and shoulders leading curricular development on, I don't know, music or arts or STEM, whatever it might be. The areas where if you asked your community and the wider marketplace, your competitors, what are you really good at? Those are the sorts of things that you need to be identifying. You also need to not forget your culture. Now, culture is really important, your school culture, when it comes to a USP for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it is highly likely that at least part of your unique selling point will be embedded in something that you're doing differently in your school culture. So finding out what that is a really important question to ask yourselves. It's also really important because culture is one of the hardest things to copy. So if you're thinking about a competitive marketplace, if we forget that we're talking about schools for the moment, if we think about ourselves in another business marketplace, there is constant copying. You've got the factories in China that are constantly copying your product. So the idea is you find a USP which is really hard to copy, really hard to emulate. It will then last longer as your USP before everybody else catches up. And culture is one of the hardest things to emulate and to copy for other schools. So when you're thinking about your culture, if you can identify some of your USP as being rooted in that school culture, you've got a bit of a head start, because if you can clarify and communicate that really clearly to other people within your target audiences, it's really hard for people to copy from other schools. And then the final thing to think about is don't forget about emotion. Now, this is the top tip for me. This is what I see people forgetting all the time. When you're thinking about your USP, it is not just the things that you do, so the subjects, the facilities, the co-curricular activities, the culture, etc. It is the way that you make people feel. The way that your pupils and your parents feel about your school is likely to be a very compelling and strong USP if you can put your finger on what that feeling is. Again, it's hard for others to copy. It's hard to copy giving your parents and your pupils a really overwhelming emotional connection to the school. But actually, we also know the other advantage about thinking about emotion is that when people are making big investment decisions, and let's be honest, independent schooling, private schooling is a big investment of money for these parents, they think that they are using a logical, rational decision-making process to compare alternative schools when they're making that final decision about which school to choose. The reality is the way that we know our brains work, a huge amount of decision-making, cognitive research has shown that actually emotion is one of the strongest drivers behind decision-making. We then, as humans, pretend to ourselves that we're being rational and logical and evidence-based. In actual fact, that's hiding the fact that underneath everything, we mostly make our decisions around emotion. So if you can think about the emotions that your pupils and parents currently feel as they are part of your school day, part of your school community, find a way to bottle that, to communicate it really clearly with visuals, with words, with video, and then put that out into the world. If that's an emotion that your target audience also wants to feel about the way their children are being educated, then that's something that's very, very powerful. And in actual fact, when I've had these conversations with the schools that I've been working with, quite often it is this emotional element that gives them a new way of thinking about their USP, which then unlocks a new way of communicating that to their marketplace. But remember, the most important thing, once you've gone through all these steps to find your USP, the most important thing is that you find something that your ideal family cares about. It's got to be something that's different, not necessarily entirely worldwide unique, but it does have to be something different. But it also has to be something relevant to your target audience, to make them sit up and listen and think, I've got to choose that school for my kids. That is the best school because it's doing this particular thing, whatever your USP is, differently, and I really care about that. I really value that, and I'm going to choose that school because of that. So this is not done in isolation. It has to be rooted in the reality of your school and your school's community, but it also has to be outward looking. What do your ideal family, your audience, what do they care about? Fantastic. As always, I love to hear your feedback on these podcast episodes. So do drop me a line. Let me know what you think about my thoughts around USPs. And also if there's any other topics that you want me to cover in future episodes. And as always, if you'd like a little bit of a helping hand on some of these things, just reach out and we can talk about how I might be able to work with your school to help them define their USP. Have a fantastic week, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye-bye then. Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.